Today we'll talk about making a cleric in Dungeon Crawl Classics. So I've been promising we'll do some more DCC content. I decided we will do specific classes. Now, they're not really that detailed, but there are some things that I think might cause issues when you're either building or playing them. Plus, I'll talk about kind of how I handle certain aspects of the classes. And every GM will handle it differently, but this is how I like to handle my clerics. So first off, the main stat on a cleric is personality. And let's be honest, you really want to use your stats in DCC. Since you roll 3d6 down the line, you're bound to get a lot of really bad rolls. It's not like a point buy where you can place your stats where you want them, or even like a 46 drop the lowest where you have a good chance of having okay stats across the board. In this, you will get some really bad stats. And when you roll, if you're playing DCC, you should play the way the game's made to be played. You'll roll it down the line, so in order from strength all the way down through luck. And then that gives you your stats. You don't have the flexibility of roll in place if you're playing the game as written. And that's what we do. We play as written. I think that's part of the fun. Again, it goes back to when we played original D&D and you rolled down the line, and that determined what your character was. You didn't determine it, your rolls did. And like I said, 3d6 doesn't give you a lot of leeway. You will have bad stats. But if personality is your best stat, and let's say your best stat's a 13 or a 14, so you've got a +1, and everything else is a 0 or worse, you're going to want to build that as a cleric. Now, clerics get 1d8 of hit points at each level. So they're not bad. But again, you're rolling, you're not averaging. So you could get unlucky. I mean, we have people in the game that are unlucky. And let's take a step back and talk about clerics. I mean, clerics represent their gods. And the game is really specific that the gods are kind of petty and vindictive, regardless of who they are. So you really need to pay attention to what you're picking as a cleric. I'll give you an example. If you're a lawful cleric, the characters in your party, if they want to get healed, really need to be either lawful or neutral. And there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the reason I have a cleric in the game is to keep the characters alive, keep them up and running. And as well as being able to turn unholy, stuff like that. But and let's talk about this. When you lay on hands, you're healing your characters. If they're the same alignment, they get more dice. If they're adjacent, meaning one away, they get one die less. And if they're opposed, then they'll get even less dice. I think it's 2 dice. Now, also, it does say that healing someone who is part of an opposed alignment is basically a sin. It almost always counts as a sin unless it's an extraordinary event in the service of the deity. I don't really consider adventuring an extraordinary event. An extraordinary event would be if you were sent on a quest by your deity, which can happen when you get disapproval. So if you're just going out to rescue villagers that your deity probably doesn't care about, because maybe they don't worship them, they're different alignments, so the deity doesn't care, that's not an extraordinary event in the eyes of that deity. So that lawful cleric healing that chaotic character will have committed a sin. As a GM, you have a choice to make. And every time that you either fail a spell check or commit something that your deity would be considered a sin, you get disapproval from those gods. Again, it's like you failed in their eyes. So the deities, being the petty beings they are, you're a failure. you get Disapproval. And what that means is where almost everybody else in the party is going to critically fail on a 1 all the time, a Cleric's Disapproval increases your critical fail range. So let's say you cast a spell, but it doesn't go off because you rolled a 1 through 11. That means you don't lose the spell, but now you have 1 disapproval rating. The disapproval will now mean a 1 or a 2 rolled naturally on the die is a critical failure. That means at that point, you roll a 2. Not only does your disapproval go up, but you're also rolling on the disapproval table. And so if you roll a 1, you roll 1d4 on disapproval, a 3 if you're failing there, 3d4, a 5, 5d4. And let's be honest, the larger the number, the more heinous the disapproval chart gets. You know, it'll go from something like have to pray for 10 minutes or whatever after combat is over to make your deity happy, down to you have to go on this massive quest and heal the infirmed or the crippled, to having to do horrible do things that are horrible, you know, as for you, because you got to go off on a quest and do this stuff, which is good for the GM because it gives you something to write about. But it means that until you meet that quest, you might be at a massive minus at all times to lay on hands, or not able to cast spells more than once a day, like only lay on hands once a day per character. So you really, really don't want to risk disapproval. Now, because doing healing on someone who's directly opposed to you, and it doesn't even in my opinion, it doesn't have to even be a lawful versus chaotic. Let's say it's a god within the same realm of yours, but their realm is opposed. Like you worship a god of peace, they worship a god of war, they're opposed. So that would be a sinful act. That's going to rate disapproval for you. Generally, I give a large chunk of disapproval for doing that. I'm kind of leaning towards what I've been doing is just giving an arbitrary number, but I'm leaning towards giving a D10 of disapproval if that any cleric ever heals an opposed character. That's not being a mean GM. That's taking the spirit of the rules. Because your gods, again, these gods are total douchebags. And if you do something they don't like, and let's face it, healing that god of war's person, the god of peace is going to be like, why are you healing that guy? That god's a jerk. I hate him. So he's going to punish you. And it's going to be, because it's a sin, it's going to be a little worse. So it may be a D6 of disapproval, a D10. I'm going to make that final arbitration this weekend. Like I said, I've been giving out set numbers now, but I really feel like it's going to be random as to whether or not the god's really paying attention and they get really pissed off, or maybe you roll a 1 on that die and they're like, what, something happened? Take a disapproval. And that's how I'm going to treat it. It's really up to the GM how they do it, but I kind of want to give it that randomness in my own game. But that's something you need to pay attention to, is the party itself. And also, you want to choose your alignment, because when you're turning unholy, you're going to have specific things that are unholy to your alignment. So if you take a look, like lawful gods, unholy creatures are anything that's from chaos, and undead, demons, devils, chaotic extraplanar creatures, monsters like basilisks or medusas, chaos primes, chaotic humanoids like orcs, or chaotic dragons. So those are automatic unholy creatures for a lawful cleric. As such, you can turn unholy and turn those. It's not like in Dungeons and Dragons and other systems where you're turning undead. This is, you're turning something that's unholy to your alignment. Neutral, you have mundane animals. That's silly. You're going to turn cats and dogs. Undead, demons, devils, monsters like basilisks or medusas, lycanthropes, perversions of nature like yugs and slimes. Um, so they have their own set. Now, they're not opposed to either law or chaotic. They're adjacent, so they can't turn someone from law or chaos. Um, and then chaos, it's angels, paladins, lawful dragons, lords of law, lawful primes, law-aligned humanoids, example, goblins, and lawful aligned creatures. So, like you, again, you're very rarely on any of these adventures, unless a GM creates an evil campaign where you're going out and fighting good guys, you're not going to be able to turn very much of anything that you run into these campaigns. You know, the undead and stuff like that. You're going to go, turn undead. And the GM's going to say, it's turn unholy. Those undead are directly like you. They're chaos. You can't turn them. So you need to pick your alignment carefully. Um, so if you know, and let's be honest, most of the times you're going to be running into those undead, those creatures that are going to be your enemy or doing something terrible to the village, stuff like that. You need to pick one of the two alignments that are more likely to be able to assist the party instead of hindering it all the time. So law and neutral are the most beneficial as an adventurer, unless you're playing an evil campaign. Now, another thing to think about alignment, or to realize, is your alignment determines the weapons that you can use as a cleric. So lawful clerics can use a club, mace, sling, staff, warhammer. Neutral clerics, a dagger, mace, sling, staff, any kind of sword. And the chaos clerics, axe, bow, and these are any's. Now, dagger, dart, and flail. So it's going to determine your weapons. And like I said, it's possible within your own alignment that you'll have opposing gods. Um, like the god of peace is opposed to the god of war. So you would be committing a sin if you're either of those gods healing a cleric from the opposed god, unless you're on a quest together. That is basically assigned by your deity. So it's not just a matter that every time you're going out, that it's a quest that your god's going to be like, no, your god he's not going to care, like I said, about those villagers and stuff because they're petty and they're jerks. They don't care. I mean, you're lucky that they give you spells. I mean, that's the way I see the gods of Dungeon Crawl Classics. They give you the spells, they say, don't bother me too much. And if you screw up, I'm going to slap you on the wrist. So they're not nice people. You don't want to have to do anything to make them mad because it gets ugly. So pick your alignment carefully. And that's all I'm going to say on that. As you move up, your caster level is determined by your player level. Now, since you can't multi-class in this, your level's your level. It's going to be real simple. You have magic and you have spells. Now, the spells that you have are going to be different than the spells that a magic user has or a wizard has. Basically, to cast a spell, you make a spell check with your personality modifier. Hopefully you have one, plus your caster level. And that'll determine whether or not you cast that spell. Now, at first level, 1 through 11 is always a fail. And a fail means you did something and screwed up and pissed off your god. Yes, we know it's random, but it is what it is. That's the game. Every time you fail, you pissed off your god, your disapproval goes up, your crit range goes up. You got to be careful. So if you have the stats, I think sometimes it's good as a cleric to not try to just cast like you would playing D&D or Pathfinder, where you're just like, I cast this, I cast that, I do this. You're going to have to be a battle cleric, hopefully that has strength stats, so that you can step up and bash some people with the weapons that your god approves of, so that when you really need those spells, they're available. Or, I mean, they're always available. You don't lose them, but you're not running the risk of rolling a giant handful of D4 that says you can't cast any spells for the rest of the day or something worse when you're done. So as a cleric, plan to be a battle cleric that does cast spells, that does heal, but you understand the dice aren't always going to be in your favor and it's going to hurt you. And you're going to, at some point, I mean, we've literally had clerics this weekend. My one cleric had a 12 disapproval range, and they were like, I'm just not casting any spells. I'm done. And you couldn't blame them because at that point they had gotten lucky. They tried to roll at 11, and they rolled, I think it was like a 3 or a 4, so they only threw a few dice, not what they could have been forced to throw. And they're like, I'm done. Because the dice weren't in their favor. They just couldn't do it anymore. They're like, I'm going to have to take a long rest. We got to wait the 24 hours. I can't move or cast spells. You know, I'll bash things, but there's a good chance I'm going to die because I've been hit. And, you know, these are the decisions you have to make in DCC. Now, let's say you have built up penalties and disapproval. You can reduce that range through sacrifices. And let's talk about that. You can make sacrifices. And what that means is, like, for every 50 gold pieces that you sacrifice, 50 gold pieces of sacrifice goods, you can cancel 1 point of normal disapproval range. The example they give, a disapproval range of 1 through 4 can be reduced to 1 through 3. A natural 1 still counts. So let's say you've got 50 gold pieces of mundane items that you've picked up and you're like, oh man, I can't afford this 1 through 4. So you sacrifice it to your god. Maybe you burn it, whatever you do, whatever ritual you decide is appropriate. That's sacrificed, it's gone, but you've dropped a point of disapproval. So you can burn, melt down, donate to the needy, contribute to a temple, you know, stuff like that. You can do that to reduce your disapproval for the day. Now, your disapproval will reset after you've taken your long rest and had your day. But sometimes you don't have that kind of time. You could, in the morning, your first encounter, just roll horribly, do some dumb things that piss your god off, and be at bad disapproval. And you can't shut down the adventuring day because your cleric has pissed off their god. So you have to figure out some way to get that down. And sometimes you got to bite the bullet and move on and just decide not to cast. And hopefully, you know, if you have a large enough party, you have more than one cleric so that somebody can take up the slack. And sometimes it's a good idea to have a lawful and a neutral cleric. Forget that chaotic guy because, you know, nobody likes that guy. Now, like I said, I talked about what you can turn as turn unholy. But again, that's just a d20 plus your personality modifier plus your caster level. So again, personality is ultimately important because that is your modifier as a cleric. You don't want to, I consider it really trolling a party if you pick a bad stat or even your worst stat and go, I'm a cleric, and you're always at minuses. Don't be that guy or girl. Nobody likes that person. All right. So, lay on hands. You will have a number of dice that you can throw based on your spell check. So I'm going to look at the chart. Now at first level, and what it's based on is the hit die of the person you're healing. So you do lay on hands, and you're lawful, you heal a lawful creature. You roll, you get a 12. That's 2 die. But they're a first level character, so you can do 1 of their hit die. So let's say you're healing another cleric, so they've got a d8, you'll roll a d8, and that is what they'll get back. Now, if it's adjacent, it would be 1 die. The only time that it's not 2 die away for the opposed is on that 12 to 13. So it would be 1 die down. Now, let's say you get a great roll and you guys are 5th level. You roll a 20 and, that's your total. 4 die for same, 3 for adjacent, 2 for opposed, plus that sin. So you're going to get a ding on your disapproval. So you really want to make sure that your alignment is close, personality is your main, and you can get as high a number as possible so you can heal more. It's not like, again, it's not like D&D and others where you've got all these other heal spells that you can use. You have your lay on hands, and that's what you're healing with. So you want to make sure you have the best ability to roll a big number as possible, and that's why your personality is very important. Now, another aspect of lay on hands is that you can heal certain things. So you can, instead of healing, elect to heal specific conditions. And give you an example, or the list, like broken limbs, 1 die. Organ damage, 2 dice. Disease, 3 dice. Poison, 3 dice. Blindness, 4 dice. And those are also determined by level as to what you can do. But the better you roll, the more things you can do. So you really want to, and I'm not going to stress it anymore. So let's look at what else you have as a cleric. Divine aid. As a cleric, you can ask for aid to beseech your deity for help. Let's read what it says. Beneficial followers are already rewarded with spells and the ability to turn unholy, so it must be recognized that requesting direct intervention is an extraordinary act. To request divine aid, the cleric makes a spell check at the same modifier that would apply were he casting a spell. The extraordinary act imparts a cumulative plus 10 penalty to future disapproval range. So you can request divine aid, but it automatically adds 10 to your disapproval. So if you were at 1, you're now at 11. If you were at 5, you're now at 15. You do want to be careful when you select divine aid, because it's going to hurt you. Now, it could be you are at the end of an adventure, you're facing down the big bad boss, and you decide you're going to throw caution to the wind, request divine aid, and hope you get an 18 or higher, which is really what you're going to need, like an extraordinary request. Example, summon in and control a living column of flame. You might need that for the boss because your party's going down hard and you need something big. So you're going to roll that and you get it, but you get massive disapproval. So maybe you'll win the fight and maybe you won't be able to heal anybody because you've already amassed enough disapproval that you're going to have to roll major dice and hope that you don't fail, like with a 14 out of 15 and throw 14d4 on this table of awful and get the most heinous thing possible. So it all comes down to you have this awesome thing that you can get and you have this terrible price that you'll pay for asking for it. Again, because your deity, regardless if it's the deity of peace or whatever, they're all jerks. So you're going to get punished for asking for help. They're like, I gave you spells, I gave you healing. Asking for more really pisses me off. So you need to think about that. But that's pretty much it for clerics. You're going to have clerics in the party. And I say clerics because 1 is not going to be enough. I think our current party, well, right now we're level 2 and everybody still has 2 characters running. And so we have a few clerics. Now we have 6 players. So we'll see what we end up with. I have a feeling we'll be probably one or two afterwards because there are certain characters that everybody likes more than their clerics. Um, and for one guy, the cleric is his best character. So I know he'll bring that over. For the other, he's got a cleric and a warrior. The warrior's his better character. The other guy's got a cleric and a dwarf. I think he's ambivalent about it, so he may take the cleric, he may take the dwarf. But we'll see. And we have another cleric. It's a cleric dwarf combo. We got a duo that has cleric dwarf combos, so we'll see what comes out of it. We have 4 clerics and then a bunch of other guys running around. But honestly, in any party, you're really going to want 2. Unless you've got a group of 4, then you're probably going to run across. Hopefully, you have stats for a cleric. Somebody doesn't have to take the horrible cleric. But clerics are good. I mean, there are a lot of useful spells in there. Word of command, they use that a fair amount because they can tell somebody to halt or cease. So they stop doing combat or attack and point at a comrade. Now, if you're asking them to do something that goes against what they would normally do, like that comrade, then yeah, they're at a +4 on their saving throw. But you get a good roll, odds are probably against the creature that they'll get a good roll, and it works out well. Turn Unholy has worked really well in what we're running because it's chased off a bunch of things for a long time. I figure by the time they're gone from that room, that stuff is not going to be there anymore, so they're good to go. I mean, there are a lot of spells that are extremely useful. Now, it is random, your spell list. I mean, you roll die, and hopefully you get Word of Command, or you get some of these other spells that are very useful. In fact, let's take a look at the spell list real quick, just at level 1. Like I said, we're not going to talk about level 2. It all gets better, and the thing is, it also gets worse because your failure range, instead of being 1 through 11, at level 2 goes to 1 to 13, and it just keeps going up. Spells become more difficult to cast. It's really a wash because you've got your caster level added on, but I mean, they feel like they get more difficult to cast. They don't get easier the higher you go up. Your level and the added fail range wash themselves, basically. But I mean, at first level, you've got Second Sight is useful. You can ask the DM if you get a good enough roll, what do I see is going to happen in the next 30 minutes if we do this? And they can tell you. Paralysis is nice. Holy Sanctuary is nice. You can protect yourself so they're not going to attack you. Let's say you're down to 1 hit point and you decide to chicken out. You roll Holy Sanctuary. They're going to be forced to attack somebody else if they can. Darkness is good because you can cast that in an area, blind those things, walk on by. Hopefully, like there was an area with bars, and if you walked by them, beams came out, killed you anyway, and they darkened the room. They couldn't see anymore, so that was nice. But there are all kinds of spells that are very useful to the party, along with your Lay on Hands and Turn Unholy. So hopefully you get good rolls when you roll for your spells, because remember, you randomly roll spells. You don't get to pick them. And hopefully you get lucky. And I mean, if I don't really feel that there are bad spells for a cleric like a wizard where you can get stupid stuff that there's no combat spells. They really can help you. Almost everything here can help you as a cleric if you're creative with the character. If you get a whole bunch of stupid stuff like cantrip and other things that you can't do anything in combat with, yeah, I usually let them reroll half those spells at first level, and then they take what they get in the rerolls. But clerics, they're great. They aid the party. They keep them alive. You have to have them. So if you've got personality as your main trait or ability score, use it. Take advantage of it. Help your party. Do awesome things and have a lot of fun. Just remember, use your weapons. Go in there, beat the hell out of things, and have fun. Anyway, that's it for today. Next time, we will... Who will we do? We'll do the Thief. That's next in order. The next week, we'll talk about the Thief. There are a few things we've had some issues with at the table, like the sneak, someone assuming that that's free invisibility, and I don't give that. It's not the same thing. But we'll discuss thieves, their skill sets, and how to use them, and how I don't think they should be used, because one is not the other. Sneaking is not invisibility. It's you're good at hiding, and until somebody passes, they don't see you. But that's a whole nother thing, and we'll talk about that next week when we talk about creating a thief in DCC. But anyway, put your comments down below. I'm interested to hear other GMs. How do you treat clerics? Do you ding them for healing those opposed characters? How harshly do you do it? Is it one? Do you roll a die? And how dicky do you think your gods really are? I mean, personally, from what I've read, it's like, yeah, these guys are all capricious and jackasses. So they're all going to ding everybody for doing something wrong. That's why you've got disapproval. But let me know. Let me know how you do it. Players, let me know how your GM treats disapproval and all that stuff as a cleric. So remember, subscribe, like, comment, do all that good stuff down below, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.